Hello, everyone in this room. If you're not eating, I'm gonna need you to make your way up into the sanctuary because we about to start African Liberation Day on up. Okay, so let's go. No, don't nobody know me, so I sound crazy up and down on the speaker over there.
All right. Peace, Africans. Y'all can do better, a little louder, a little clap, a little louder. It's African Liberation Day this weekend. Clap, clap, clap. So I'm excited. The first time I was ever asked to participate in African Liberation Day was 2019. It was right here in Baltimore, and it was a symposium. And that was the first time I had just joined BAP, maybe a couple months in, and I was asked to speak about what I'm going to speak about today. Why do we care about not just African Liberation Day, but Africa in total? So my name is Erica Keynes. I am a member of the Black Alliance for Peace here locally. I'm also the national co-coordinator of BAP. I have been with this organization for a very long time. And one of the things that I truly value in this organization is the emphasis on connecting the domestic to the global, making sure that we have clarity on what's happening here in our local area, like Baltimore, for instance. And if any of you saw the webinar last night, then you know it's not significantly different from what's happening on the continent. And the struggles and the fight that we're waging here is not dissimilar from the struggles and the fight that's being waged on the continent for sovereignty, for self-determination, for liberated zones. Much of that is what we're trying to do here. And a lot of what we're trying to do here is inspired by the revolutionary struggles that are happening in Africa, being able to see that, yes, we have won, and it's a possibility that we can win. I think is very significant. And that's, for me, I think the value of African Liberation Day, because it allows for those kind of conversations to take hold. I also like that we get to gather. I love to see my African people. I think everybody looks good and they white. Not gonna say nothing about anybody who's not white. But I say that to say that this is, for me, and also for BAP, this day is an emphasis on those struggles that we're having. One of our campaigns, initial campaigns, has been U.S. out of Africa, shut down AFRICOM. Because when we talk about things like Pan-Africanism, revolutionary Pan-Africanism, more specifically, for the fight for, or the political objective, rather, for Africa under United Socialist, one United Socialist Africa, right? Well, that political objective. When we have that discussion, oftentimes now, especially as we're seeing what's developing in AES, folks are not talking about the conditions of why we have not reached Pan-Africanism. There's no real conversation around AFRICOM, not in the way that it should be. So as we're seeing folks talk about Traore or talk about the AES more, there should be an equivalent about discussions about AFRICOM and its role in sort of deterring any advancement that can occur, not just in the AES, but across Africa. So if we're talking about wanting to liberate our people, or if we have a clarity that until Africa is free, we cannot be free here, then we need to be raising and continuing to raise the issue of AFRICOM until it is no more. So yeah, I want to yield there, because this is not, my panel. And I'm going to pass it off to Jamila Alexander, who is the co-coordinator of BAP Baltimore and a member of the party.
Thank you, Erica, for that amazing introduction for African Liberation Day today. We're so excited to see you all here, and we're actually live streaming on BAP's Instagram. So if you all have any loved ones or friends that y'all would like to share this symposium with after, you can share it over with them. So I wanted to start by saying my name is Jamila Alexander. I am a work-study member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. The AAPRP is a permanent, independent, revolutionary, socialist, Pan-African political party based in Africa. Inside of the AAPRP, we stress the importance of political education, and that is reflected through our work-study process. This process allows us to not only allow ourselves to decolonize other people, but also ourselves, which is the most important component as a revolutionary human being, correct? Or incorrect, right? We cannot be telling people or sharing with them about history or trying to teach them about their conditions if we're also not trying to figure out inside of ourselves how the country that we've grown up in, or the world of imperialism that we've been infected by, right, how that impacts us. So we're really, really important on decolonizing ourselves, reaching our consciousness, and really rejecting all aspects of liberalism. That's reflected through our work study process in the AAPRP. So before we start this symposium, I would like to share a little bit of history with you all and ground the room on the purpose of African Liberation Day. African Liberation Day was born in Africa, founded in 1958 when Kwame Nkrumah convened the first conference of independent states held in Accra, Ghana. It was intended by 8 independent African countries at that time. You have to understand that Africa was dealing with colonialism, settler colonialism, imperialism. It was ravaged. We had experienced enslavement. We have experienced our land being stolen, our resources being stolen. And still today, you see many of the impacts of imperialism and neocolonialism on the African continent. And this is really, really important why we have African Liberation Day, but I'm gonna get back into the history. So during this conference, this convening, on April 15th, it was declared that it was going to be Africa Freedom Day. This was going to mark each year onward to the progress of the liberation movement and to symbolize the determination of African people to free themselves from foreign domestic exploitation. Between 1958 and 1963, the nation-class struggle intensified in Africa. In the world, 17 countries in Africa won their independence, and in 1960 it was proclaimed the Year of Africa. Further advances were made with the defeat of US imperialism in Asia and Caribbean nations. On May 25th, 1963, 31 African heads of state convened a summit meeting to found the Organization of African Unity, better known as OAU. They renamed African Freedom Day, African Liberation Day, and changed the date from April 15th, as we stated before, to May 25th. Today, we're meeting to celebrate African Liberation Day, but we have a webinar on May 25th that we all encourage you all to check out. Go to africanliberationday.net. So, May 25th, African Liberation Day, right? The US, French, British, and Portuguese, Dutch, Belgian imperialists respond to these attempts to express self-determination by doing what they do best. They assassinated revolutionary leaders. They spread their troops around the world, spreading covert attempts to destabilize African nations, not only on the African continent, but also inside the Americas. Today in 2025, the OAU transitions into the African Union, and that body is controlled by the same neocolonial forces that our founder Kwame Nkrumah described in his book, Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism. So what does this history tell us? African Liberation Day is not a holiday. It never has been. It's a battle cry. From across the African world, our continent, our nations in the Americas, our African people that are trapped inside the imperial cores inside the US and Europe. We call for organization among the poor, the workers, the elderly, the youth, and all African people, no matter their gender, their sexuality, their religion, their birthplace, their language. It doesn't matter. We want us all to unite against imperialism, backstabbing liberalism, and neocolonial drainage. We have to get organized, Africans, period. 62 years after the founding of the OAU, Africa today is still not free. Every African nation, but Eritrea and Niger, at least have one AFRICOM base, okay? Terrorism spreads across our communities. IMF and World Bank destroys our economies and force us to rely on predatory loans. NGOs and nonprofits steal our brightest minds and spread confusion across our world. Our political parties, unions, and organizations are facing severe repression and counterinsurgency. We're experiencing jail, forced disappearances, torture, and more. And neocolonial forces rule the majority of our land in service of imperialism. These are our conditions. This is our reality. Not the flashy members of the Black leadership class, like the first Black governor, Wes Moore, or Baltimore City Mayor Brandon Scott, or Kenyan President Ruto. The total liberation and unification of Africa under one scientific socialist government is essential for the freedom of African people, and this will mark the advancement for all oppressed peoples worldwide. This is what Pan-Africanism is. These conditions mentioned earlier do not exist only inside the African world, but many of the other colonized and previous colonized nations inside of Asia and the Americas. We must understand that the struggle for African people is a part of a worldwide fight against imperialism and for justice. To counter these systems of co-optation and repression, we have to unite and coordinate our movements across borders and languages. We must be anti-imperialist if we are serious about smashing the structures that destroy our people and our earth. There are already examples of this throughout our history and our movements of uniting and coordinating ourselves collectively, but we must return to the source to gain more clarity and guidance for our future actions. This year's theme for African Liberation Day is Africa for Africans, Revolutionary Pan-African Unity Across Borders in the Battle for Socialism Against Imperialism. This theme highlights the call for Pan-African unity as an integral force to defeating imperialism and ushering in socialism. Imperialism will find its grave in Africa. We hope that you all are able to learn from the symposium today of revolutionary and dedicated panelists that join us this Friday evening. Please take out your notebooks, your pens and pencils, and be prepared to ask questions throughout the Q&A. You will not want to miss out on the political education you would like to receive, and happy African Liberation Day. Okay, so I'm gonna ask for our first panelist to come up and our first moderator. So if you're on the Struggle on the Continent panel, please make your way up here. Yeah, y'all can sit however you want. Yes. Okay, you can go in the order that we have here. The mic is on.
Peace, comrades. This panel is called Struggle on the Continent. Our three panelists are esteemed organizers, and I will be making their introductions shortly. The African continent is massive, and the dynamics change from country to country and region to region. From the uniting of the Sahelian states, creating the AES, which contains Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, to the unwavering resistance of excuse me, of the African Party for Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, and the steadfastness of independent Eritrea, the only African country that never had an AFRICOM base. Our speakers will expand on the struggles and ways we can strengthen our coordination across the continent and the broader African world. Our first speaker is Obi, a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, Black Alliance for Peace, Baltimore, and the Coalition for the Elimination of Imperialism in Africa, which recently had a delegation to the AES in June of 2024. He currently resides in occupied Piscataway territory, known as Baltimore, Maryland. Our next speaker is Mikel. Mikel is a computer science graduate currently pursuing a master's degree in political science, where his academic and personal work intersect around African liberation, anti-imperialism, and revolutionary development. He currently serves as a staffer across various departments at the Embassy of the State of Eritrea, supporting diplomatic initiatives rooted in self-reliance, sovereignty, and principled internationalism. Born in Eritrea, Mikel immigrated to the United States at the age of 13 and has lived here for the past 22 years. While Eritrea remains the core of his identity and lifelong commitment, he also embraces the United States with its diverse communities and people as his second home and extended family. As an activist and advocate for all Black and African struggles worldwide, Mikel is deeply passionate about ending Africa's neo-colonial era and building a future defined by dignity, independence, and African-led transformation. He is a firm believer that liberation is not just a political ideal, it is a lived commitment. And lastly, we have the good brother Chalky Irving. At the age of 83, Chalky is perhaps the eldest male member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Chalky grew up in a housing project in North Philadelphia. I know that's right. After leaving the US military in 1963, amen to that, he moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. During the time period of 1963, the Black Panther Party was non-existent. They were formed in 1966 in Oakland, just across the bridge from San Francisco. Chalky did not join the Black Panther Party during those years, but always thought of himself as a radical. At least he talked about revolution, but did not join any organization. After returning to Philly 12 years later, he discovered that his youngest brother had been a member of the Black Panther Party in Philly, but was now associated with a group called the All African People's Revolutionary Party. His brother invited him to a gathering in Washington, D.C.'s Malcolm X Park called African Liberation Day. Chalky was very impressed with the messages he heard, especially after later reading a book entitled The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. Garvey's statement, "A race without power and authority is a race without respect," awakened him to what is needed to enable a people to have power and authority: organization. That's all he needed to know. So here he is today, after 46 years of organizing for Pan-Africanism with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and learning thoroughly that without information, one cannot think. We end all messages with who and what we are. Ready for revolution.
Okay, can you hear me? All right. So thanks for the introduction, Gina. As said, I'm Obi. I want to thank everyone in attendance, both in physical form, online, and in revolutionary spirits. I want to thank the organizers for my inclusion on this panel. So today I want to talk to you about an exciting development. I mean, we've heard of it, the Alliance for Sahelian States, which is now the Confederation of Sahelian States. And in the future, it will be the Federation of Sahelian States. So, but before I want to get into that, I want to talk about something that's very important. This word has come up a lot, and that's neocolonialism. So neocolonialism is the primary contradiction. So it's the primary struggle in Africa today. As mentioned, Nkrumah wrote a book about neocolonialism where he called it the last stage and perhaps the most dangerous stage of imperialism. The old colonial model, where you had boots on the ground and actual colonial governors and all that, has given way to a new colonial model, a neocolonial model, where on the surface, the state appears to be independent. It can even have its own flag, its own national anthem, and all these things. But instead, in reality, the economic, political, and military policy is directed from outside. So there's some examples of neocolonialism, for instance, in Nigeria. So in Nigeria, the economic policy there is wholly dictated by the whims of the international finance, to the point where you can read Nigerian economic policy in the Financial Times before the president even says it. And President Tinubu was leading the charge to invade Niger after the popular coup in 2023. And he wasn't doing this on behalf of anyone else but France and the US. So another example of neocolonialism would be in the DRC. So President Chikedi, I was practicing, sorry about that. So he's pushing to build the Libido Corridor, which is a rail project that's the sole purpose is to further the extraction of the natural wealth of the DRC. And this isn't for the people of the DRC, even though it's framed like this. This is wholly for, once again, the benefit of outside corporations and imperialists. He's also selling out the DRC's resources for protection against the Rwandan-backed M23 group, which the Rwanda is led by another US strongman, Paul Kagame. So in this sense, he's selling out minerals for protection against another US asset. This also occurs in the US. So in the US, we live in a state that has a Black governor and a whole Black political class. But even though that they say they are for us, they're actually, once again, doing work of ethnic cleansing, police brutality, not for the communities, not for our communities, but for developers and, in general, imperialists. So that brings me to the AES. So the AES, as we probably all know, there were 3 military coups in neighboring countries. First Mali in 2021, Burkina in 2022, and then Niger in 2023. So these coups were one of the reasons why these coups were launched, or one of the reasons why the people wanted the French out, why the French were there to begin with, was because of the NATO-backed destruction of Libya, which unleashed terrorism on the whole region. So it's one of the things to note when I was there, one thing that really stood out is that people there were really clear about who their enemies were. So they knew that the French were there not for their interests, but to protect mining interests for France. So, and I think this is in contrast to like in all over Africa, if you ask like what the problem of Africa is, many people will say we have bad leaders. But that misses the root cause. Like the bad leaders are just part of the whole neocolonial system. our problem in Africa is neocolonialism. So in response to this, the current governments kicked out the neocolonialists, they kicked out the French, and have been taking the countries on a path to development. So this includes not only just kicking out the French, but Niger has recently kicked out the US as well. Now they're using the mineral wealth to develop the region. So that includes in agriculture, there's more irrigation projects. They're actually providing irrigation or agricultural materials to farmers so that they can increase their food production, because this is one of the issues that they want to be self-reliant. In mining, they're increasing royalties from mining. So when companies go and take the resources, they used to pay a pittance to the governments, but now they're getting more. And also they're trying to move up on the mining chain. And so I think one of the biggest successes of the AES, though, is really this idea of African unity, and that African unity can really solve a lot of our problems. I think that's a huge success. And even now, like we see all over social media and in many different places, this idea that we need to unite to be able to liberate Africa. And that conscious raising, I think, is critical. So to that end, like there have been some broader impacts due to the AES as well. So one of these is that we saw just recently, for example, Michael Langley was trying to attack Traore. And in response, worldwide, there were protests in support of Traore, denouncing Michael Langley, denouncing US machinations against Traore. And this was after an assassination attempt on Traore, which Burkina said was backed by Cote d'Ivoire, so another neocolonial state. And in addition, people had seen Michael Langley in the capital. And so this led to speculation that Langley was there to try to instigate a coup against Traore. So in response, people worldwide rose up to support. So also in Nigeria, there were protests about the bad governance. But one of the curious things about the protests is that you saw Russian flags popping up. And this was completely in response to what was going on in the AES. And of course, that led to huge repression by the Nigerian government. And even when another rally was planned in Nigeria to be in support of Burkina, once again, the government cracked down on this rally. So we know that these neocolonialists are scared. So in terms of this, we know that there are a lot of attacks on the AES. They're attacking it militarily through terrorism. They're attacking it economically through sanctions. There's an entire media campaign against the AES. But for all these, the AES is able to hold firm. So they've been recruiting to fight the terrorism. These are Western-backed terrorists, despite whatever media tries to tell you. They're working to grow their industries, so they develop using some help from friendly countries such as Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, or the DPRK. And so there's also attempts at opportunism here as well. So because the AES is extremely popular, there are a lot of leaders who are trying to jump on this bandwagon and say that they have some form of Pan-Africanism, when we know that's not the case at all. I think, so in closing, I just want to wrap up. So the AES really presents us a framework for the unification of Africa. So I think one of the takeaways really is the success of the AES is because they understood who their enemy was. They understood that neocolonialism was rampant on the continent and that they had to deal with that before they can make any progress. They understood that unity was strength. So if we are united, we are strong. But one thing, that's a common retort, but one thing we have to understand, unity presupposes organization. We have to be organized. Without organization, we can't be united. In AES, you met people, they would be in some form of organization, so not just radical and political formations, but women's unions, student unions, just everyone was also in organization. And so I think in that sense that we need to be organized. We need to stand together, we need to fight against neocolonialism, we need to support the AES, and we need to fight for the liberation of Africa. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mikhail. I'm here from the Embassy of the State of Eritrea. First off, I would like by thanking the organizers for having us here, also thanking the distinguished speakers as well as the guests for attending today's event. Today, I'm going to be speaking a little bit about Eritrea. Eritrea is a nation in the Horn of Africa, right between the Red Sea and Ethiopia. Eritrea has been the subject of many controversial topics in the past through maybe mainstream media you might have heard of, because Eritrea takes a certain stance towards imperialism. As far as Eritrea's history, to give a little context, Eritrea was known as under different names in the past for over 4,500 years. First was known as the land of Punt, under the 20th dynasty Egyptians, meaning the land of the gods, and it was inscribed in the Great Pyramids. Later on, it was known as DMT, that would be D''MT, and that ruled from 980 BCE all the way till about 400 BCE. That was followed by the Adulis empires, or civilization as we call, which ruled the entire Red Sea region for over 5 centuries. After about 0 AD, there was the Great Aksum Empire, which many of you probably heard of, it was mostly reported under an Ethiopian empire, although Eritreans make a claim to it. And then there was Medri Bahri, right pre-colonization, when the Italians came. And then there's Eritrea. So in 1989, the Italians came and colonized the area called Medri Bahri. They named it Eritrea, and they ruled it up until the end of World War II, when they lost all their territories due to the loss of the war. Eritrea was soon federated with Ethiopia. Ethiopia, at the time being an ally of the British Empire, was able to basically take control of Eritrea under UN Resolution 390, which was made in 1952. The Eritrean peoples were not happy with that, so they went through a 30-year struggle for independence, and gained their independence, which started in 1961 and ended on May 24th, by coincidence, by the way, with African Liberation Day, which ended May 24th, 1991, in which Eritrea gained its independence and held a referendum, which was in 1993 and was officially established as a country in the United Nations. Eritrea has always had a mindset since pre-independence, as far as like imperialism and how the country was to be modeled when it gained independence. In the early 1970s, the Eritrean Liberation Front, which later transitioned into the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, was able to draft a manifesto called Us and Our Goals. And the point of the manifesto was to basically have a road plan of what to do with the country once independence was gained, because independence was always guaranteed from their mentality, although it wasn't achieved at the time. 1993, once the Eritrean People's Liberation Front transitioned into the now People's Front for Democracy of Justice. It's known as PFDJ, which is the active current government in Eritrea. It decided to keep and implement all those goals that were made prior to independence. One of them being anti-imperialism, or pushing back on imperialism. Through, vessel or ally states, the West was able to kind of siege Eritrea, not only economically, but through a stalemate of a war with Ethiopia over border disputes. The initial war post-independence with Ethiopia was in 1998 over a border area called Badime. Thousands of people died. As a matter of fact, the Horn of Africa is a highly volatile region where there's wars that have been going on there continuously for over 100 years. But this one was really bloody. The international community stepped in 2001 and decided to do an arbitration on the border and formed an EEBC, which would be the Ethiopian Eritrean Border Commission, in order to dispute the border, to resolve the border dispute. Both nations brought their colonial maps. As we all know, every nation in Africa is on colonial borders. There was agreement on the borders. There were some claims that Eritrea was making, and there were some claims Ethiopia was making, and eventually that was settled, and Eritrea decided to agree to it. So did Ethiopia, but then Ethiopia decided to not honor the deal, and there was a stalemate all the way until 2018. Now, going on the point of neocolonialism, sorry. Because of these regional issues, because of Ethiopia's alliance with the United States, because of Eritrea's anti-imperialism views, Eritrea was punished in many ways. Economically, it was sanctioned. It was accused of helping terrorists in Somalia, the Al-Shabaab terrorists, which, by the way, got exonerated for, and these sanctions were lifted in 2018. But there was about 15 years worth of development hindering that occurred due to these sanctions. Despite these sanctions, Eritrea maintained its resilience and decided to first focus on its human capital, as we regard the people in Eritrea as the biggest resource in the country. The country is very resourceful, everything from gold, oil, potash, and many natural resources, but yet, in order to build a country, you need to build your people first. So Eritrea highly emphasized and focused on the social indicators of its people. So building schools, building hospitals, making sure literacy rates are high, making sure life expectancy is high, child mortality is low, access to clean water, and all these things. Despite the economic siege on Eritrea was able to achieve food sufficiency. To this day, Eritrea gets no aid. Eritrea was the first country in the world to kick out USA aid in 2005. Eritrea is not a member or not a member. Eritrea doesn't take any loans from the IMF or the World Bank. And at the same time, as the organizers said, Eritrea doesn't have an AFRICOM base or any foreign base as well. To add on to that, all of every single territory in Eritrea, every square inch is nationalized, can only be owned by Eritreans. What that means is foreign investors, regardless of what country they come from, can't come lease or own any land unless they have a 50-50 partner that's Eritrean. This gives the control of the land, the control of, as they say, who feeds you controls you. And one of the biggest infiltrators of neocolonialism in Africa has been aid. All aid comes with strings attached. The first emphasis us Eritreans always say when we talk to other nations or people that have the same goals as us is don't take aid. Make it yourself, do it yourself. Another is the biggest issue that we might have in neocolonialism from the economic aspect is not finishing our products in Africa. One good example I could give you is Ghana is probably one of the largest cocoa exporters in the world, but Ghana also imports almost all their chocolate. I don't see a reason why Ghana shouldn't be making their chocolate in Ghana. And this goes on so many levels, not just chocolate, obviously. There's so many resources being taken out of Africa just to be remade back and shipped back and sold for much more higher prices. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
And lastly, we will hear from Chalky. Thank you very much, Mikhail.
Thank you, comrade. After that bio, I guess this is going to be a letdown. But what I'm going to do, what I've been asked to do is to actually read a message from the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde. And it came from the officials there. It's entitled Struggles Against Imperialism and NATO Are Acts of Culture. The situation of World War III, and it's interesting, I just want to mention the fact that NATO is meeting now in Ohio. It's the first time in 40 years, and I don't think they've met, at least not in the US. So I thought it was relevant to have this reference here to NATO. Excuse me. The situation of World War III, the new Cold War, and the tasks of communist and anti-imperialist forces. World War III is not an event, but rather a process. The wars in the Congo, Yemen, Sudan, occupied Palestine, NATO's expansion, and its war against Russia, coupled with systematic sanctions against scores of countries and blockades against Cuba and provocations of new Cold War, quote unquote, against the PRC of China, People's Republic of China, the PDRK, People's Democratic Republic of Korea, that have roots in capitalism manifested in the forms of Zionism, hyper-imperialism, and its last stage of neocolonialism, hyper-imperialism. And they're losing in the areas of production, finances, and checkmated militarily. In short, the monopolarism of the dollar is losing to multipolarism. Logically, the struggle against imperialism is not an event, but rather a process. The anti-imperialist forces are gaining strength. The military components that constitute NATO are clearly defeatable. The political military capabilities of the global South are collectively stronger than NATO. Even the glorious armed struggle for national liberation in Guinea-Bissau in the 1960s and early 1980s, the PAIGC defeated NATO. It's relevant to quote Amilcar Cabral, who was one of the founders of the PAIGC. His name was Amilcar Cabral, a great Pan-Africanist who was assassinated by imperialism, by the way. His presentation at the Conference of Nationalist Organizations of Portuguese Colonies, it goes by the acronym CONCP, is composed of, I won't mention all the countries here, but Frelimo, which is I think Mozambique, MPLA, or Angola, PAIGC, Guinea-Bissau, and some others. In the session in October of 1965. In any struggle, it is of fundamental importance to define clearly who we are and who is the enemy. We, the peoples of the Portuguese colonies, are African peoples of this Africa, ensnared by imperialism and colonialism for decades, and even in some cases for centuries. NATO is concrete countries, concrete governments and states. NATO is the USA. This was in 1965, 2 years after the beginning of the armed phase of the glorious liberation struggle. By 1973, the African people of Guinea-Bissau, Cape Verde, were allies via our politically organized cultural manifestation. The PAIGC had already defeated the Portuguese military and their NATO allies. This is still significant today. The organized people of a small country defeated NATO. Guinea-Bissau doesn't manufacture weapons such as warplanes, missiles, submarines, or any other type. Its main weapons are the culture of the masses of people organized politically. The majority of the people in the homeland of Amilcar Cabral and the militants responsible and leaders of the PAIGC continue to struggle against imperialism in all its rotten manifestations. Our party, he's referring to the PAIGC, is the politically organized manifestation of our people's culture. The liberation movement, as representative and defender of the culture of the people, must be conscious of the fact that whatever may be the material conditions of the society that it represents, the society is the bearer and creator of culture. The liberation movement must furthermore embody the mass character, the popular character of the culture, which is not and never could be the privilege of one or of some sectors of the society. There aren't any foreign military bases in Guinea-Bissau, and there never have been. The Revolutionary Constitution, patience, I'm almost done here. The Revolutionary Constitution that was approved by the National People's Assembly on the 23rd of September of '73, the day before it unilaterally proclaimed independence in Guinea-Bissau on the 24th of September, 1973, prohibits foreign military bases. The democratic forces who oppose these measures are attacked by armed mercenaries sent like attack dogs from the presidential palace. These same attack dogs abuse democratic, patriotic, peaceful manifestations. They arrest and torture unarmed protesters. The PAIGC has been involved with various international and regional coordinating councils. So he goes on. I'm going to just jump to the end here. I'm sorry if I get a little, I didn't write this. The unity we seek is no idealist dream or boastful speculation. The unity we seek is a historically determined necessity. We must unite to rid our continent of imperialism. We must unite to solve the problems of poverty, sickness, poor education, and unequal distribution of the products of social labor. Finally, we must unite to ensure that future generations live in peace, prosperity, and dignity. Comrades, let us go forward, onward to victory as complete human beings. Everywhere there's an agent of imperialism, Zionism, or neocolonialism, let us go forward with tidal waves to crush them. Comrades, two sentences, I swear. Comrades, let us go forward, onward to victory as complete human beings. Everywhere there is an agent of imperialism, Zionism, or neocolonialism, let us go forward with tidal waves to crush them. Death to imperialism, death to capitalism, death to NATO. A luta continua, a vitória e certa, onward to victory, ready for revolution. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. I want to take time to point out a common thread in everyone's presentation. Not only was there a line about processes, because there is a process underway in the AES. There is a process that they followed in Eritrea. There are processes that were named taking place in Guinea-Bissau, in Cape Verde, in all of these iterations of struggle. It is not an instant transportation to revolution. It is not one day deciding that you are free. It takes processes. It takes moving from a beginning point, charting that course that you're going to take, and not wavering on your principles to reach that place. But it takes something everyone also said, organization. Everyone spoke to those processes that are essential, vital, and necessary to a liberation struggle. I'm going to now open it to audience questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and Jamila will get to you with the microphone.
Hello, hello.
Thank you. My name is Musab, Mo for short. I'm from Sudan, part of the Pan-African Forum in Sudan. Apologies in advance if I'm taking a little bit too long. But as you can imagine, you know, being from Sudan and what's going on over there right now, it's a very dire situation. And, you know, Sudan connecting West Africa with North Africa, the Horn, and East Africa is kind of, in a way, a central point of the region. So, you know, I have questions for all three. I don't know if that's even allowed or not. We have 15 minutes altogether? Oh, okay, okay. Okay, real quick with Obi, the analysis and looking at Sudan, in my view, in my analysis, it's more of a typical neo-colonial state. And, you know, if any proof of that is, you know, Netanyahu's the new Middle East map, putting Sudan in there. So how are you looking at Sudan and especially its connection with the AES as far as militias and cross-border militias and stuff like that? If you can just shed some light on that. Mikkel, my question for you is basically, you know, 2018, we had such a high point of unity in the Horn of Africa, where we had Eritrea and Ethiopia and Somalia showing solidarity together. And even, you know, after the TPLF war and all that, Ethiopia kind of, you know, unraveled Western coercion in the area and stuff like that. How can Shabia kind of like play a role in bringing back that unity and bringing back that unity in an anti-colonial way and to kind of push back against it? Baba Shaki, the moment right now of kind of Western isolation and retraction, it seems like it gives an opportunity right now for an anti-colonial discourse, not only on the continent, but in the diaspora as well. Like from your view, what are some of the ways or general discourse that can happen, you know, in the diaspora to kind of push that and kind of end that kind of imperial 70 or 80 year run since after World War II? Thank you.
We're going to start with OB since you were asked first, and we're going to work down the line. Oh, you want to?
Okay, great. So the question was about neocolonialism in Sudan. I mean, part of the conflict was brought forth by neocolonialism, right? So there was a popular movement in Sudan that was interrupted by the forces that are now battling out. And currently we know the SAF has strong Egyptian backing, while the RSF is well known to have strong UAE backing to the point that UAE is now trying to do everything against Sudan. I think it's hard in a war like that because on the one hand, you understand that the people in Sudan are kind of understandably pushing for the SAF to like at least finish this phase of the struggle. But the struggle has to continue. So it would need to get back to the, and I'm sure the people of Sudan are already working on this. Getting back to the organizing and the unity and the work that they were doing that brought about the first uprising. And I think what that also means is that all people who are justice loving, we need to make sure we understand what's going on in Sudan, make sure we're making those connections so we can support the struggles against neocolonialism, because it's the same everywhere. And so it's understanding that it's neocolonialism as the enemy and understanding that we organize against it, I think will help move.
Thank you. What was your name? Sorry. It's a pleasure to meet you. Shabia, he said, oh, Shabia do. Shabia means the people, by the way, is a term that Eritreans used during their independence struggle. So now anybody that is a very nationalistic, proud Eritrean would refer to them as Shabia. The government refers to Shabia as well because we call it the People's Party. As far as Sudan, very sad. Sudan is a very good friend of Eritrea. It actually played a very integral role to the independence of Eritrea. A lot of the logistics, a lot of the, I guess, importing of the weapons and whatnot were done through Sudan to help Eritrea's independence at the time. There's also a lot of ethnic groups that share the borders in between, a lot of Beni Amir between the border of Sudan and Eritrea. So just to bring the point, very close relationship between both nations. It was very sad to see Sudan go through recent civil wars. Eritrea's stance always been, we stand behind the Sudanese people. But if you see this most recent civil war, the biggest destabilizing factor would be the United Arab Emirates. Whether it's that they're funding the rapid support forces of Sudan, whether it's that they're bombing the entire east coast of the Red Sea side of Sudan, they're still playing a role in destabilizing Sudan. As far as Eritrea, Somalia, and Ethiopia in 2018, the entire region had a high point, like you mentioned. That was due to the ruling party that was in Ethiopia for over 20 years, that was very well aligned with the Democratic Party in Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, the war that reignited in the Horn of Africa happened the day Joe Biden was announced as president. It happened on November 3rd, 2020. Northern Command of Ethiopia was attacked by the TPLF. The TPLF was the ruling party of Ethiopia, as I said, from independence all the way up until they lost power in 2018 due to a popular uprising by the people. The TPLF had, a lot of links to Bill Gates, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, the entire Democratic Party, and they had a lot of support from them as well. The TPLF was the highest aid recipient in Ethiopia, the highest benefactor of USA aid in Ethiopia. They received well over $1 billion a year yearly. So basically, they were easily controlled for quite some time, and they were considered anchor state by the United States in the Horn of Africa, so highly influential as far as policy. Moving 2018, like you said, though, once TPLF was removed, the area was able to, through the tripartite agreement between Farmajo of Somalia, President Sass of Eritrea, and Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, was able to form an economic and military agreement, which was short-lived, unfortunately, because the TPLF decided to start a civil war in Ethiopia, which engulfed the entire region, causing over 2 million people to get displaced and over almost close to 1 million people to die in Ethiopia. Right now, there seems to be, that war did end with the Pretoria Agreement. It seems to be another, maybe war, you would say, if you were to read the news, because there's a lot of drum beating from, certain nations in Africa, in the Horn of Africa, like Ethiopia, as far as aggressively requesting access to the Red Sea. So I don't know as far as like how long this cycle is going to last, but it seems to be always, the complicity seems to be our own people, other Africans. If we look at the history of Africa, we haven't really gotten any point of history where I could say boots on the ground, the imperialists came and did something. It was more so using your own neighbor, using your own friend, using your own brother to, kind of start a war against you or start a fight against you. And it's the good old divide and conquer. So how can we get everyone on the same page? How can we minimize these issues that are going on in the Horn, such as, the Horn of Africa, like I said, the highest, most volatile area in the region. Sorry if you guys could hear that. My smart AI glasses are talking. I apologize. Yeah, so as far as just Sudan and what's going on right now, we really hope Obviously, the Sudanese people resolve the turmoil that's going on in Sudan. The turmoil that's going on in Ethiopia as far as the ethnic federalism, the civil war, if that's not solved, it's always going to have a domino effect in the whole region. There is slight issues in Somalia. Somalia does have unity, but there is issues as far as there is Somaliland, which wants to be kind of its own country. So there's like a separatist movement going on there. There's Al-Shabaab, terrorism and extremism as well. And then across the sea from Eritrea, you have Yemen, which is, unfortunately, there's many foreign fighters. It's all types of mess in Yemen. So in order for the region to progress, we're going to need some stability first. Without stability, it's going to be hard to get everyone in line and the same page. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. I don't recall the question that you begged, but if you, so pardon me. Okay. I guess you call me kind of a stump speech. That is, if you had been here when they read my bio, you know where I'm coming from here. Okay, I'm 83 years old. I just got 3 minutes. Thank you. I will defer to the coordinators. I'm 83 years old. I joined the U.S. military in 1960. I was sent to Morocco, North Africa. I didn't know I was in Africa. I didn't know where the F Morocco was. They said, you're going to Morocco. This is who they got in the military. That's who they need to recruit. And so anyway, decades later, I came across a statement by Marcus Garvey. A race without power and authority is a race without respect. Now, we're not just a race, we're a nation, and we are people. We have no respect amongst these capitalist pigs who run this world because we don't have the authority and the power that only comes from organization. Thank you.
Oh, Chalky, I'm gonna get my question. It's just for Chalky. Thank you. If you can, it's can you explain the relationship and the connection? I can't remember the term between the AAPRP and the PAIGC and the significance of it.
Okay, thank you. The PAIGC, one of the members is actually on our central committee of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. One of the leadership, I had his title, but I edited that out. So we consider the PAIGC one of the real models for African nations to follow. And this is primarily, we've actually joined with the PAIGC. We consider them our closest ally, our closest sister, brother, if you will, organization on the African continent. But that's where we're at. We certainly agree wholeheartedly with the founder, the great Amilcar Cabral. And if you don't know Cabral, I recommend it highly. Thank you.
Thank you. Give it up for our panelists. I'd like to wrap it up by saying there's one thing Africans must organize. So thank you all, and we'll be moving to the next panel.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Petros Bayen. I'm going to introduce our speakers, and we're going to get this show on the road. Around the world, the masses of colonized and oppressed people have stood up against the imperialist forces that exist inside of their societies, and that is instigated by the US and other colonial countries. In this hemisphere, we have 3 examples of countries that won their revolution and are in the process of advancing them: Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela. From the 66 years of the inhumane blockade and aggressive US foreign policy towards Cuba to the multiple attempts to destabilize Nicaragua since the FSLN overthrew the US-installed dictator Somoza, our speakers will show us how imperialist foreign policy exists to oppress progressive or revolutionary movements by any means necessary, but also the importance of uniting our shared struggles and how it allows these countries to determine their future for themselves. First, I'm going to introduce Comrade Gabriela Castillo Rodriguez. Gabriela completed her bachelor's in history at the University of Havana in 2017 and immediately pursued a graduate diploma in foreign services at the Higher Institute of International Relations, Raul Roa Garcia, graduating in 2019. In 2020, she joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Cuba as a political analyst in the US division, where she focused on bilateral relations and policy analysis. In 2023, she undertook a training assignment at the Embassy of Cuba in the United States, serving as 3rd Secretary in the Press and Information Office. In 2024, she was promoted to 2nd Secretary and received her first permanent overseas posting. Returning to the Cuban Embassy in the United States, she currently serves in the political office, leading outreach and engagement with the African diaspora and Afro-descendant communities across the US, fostering cultural and diplomatic ties. Next speaker, Comrade Ambassador Mauricio Lautaro Sandino Montes. Comrade Ambassador Sandino is a seasoned diplomat, international relations expert, and educator with over 40 years of experience in global development, cooperation, multilateral negotiations, and diplomatic leadership. A distinguished ambassador and strategic negotiator, they have represented Nicaragua at the highest levels, serving as Charge d'Affaires in Washington, D.C., 2024, Ambassador to Ethiopia, 2023, and Ambassador to Belgium, Luxembourg, and the European Union, 2009 to 2020. Their career spans key roles in multilateral forums, including as Permanent Ambassador at UNESCO, twice, President of the G77 plus China at UNESCO, and lead negotiator for the Central America-EU Association Agreement. A passionate advocate for global solidarity, Comrade Ambassador Sandino has chaired regional diplomatic groups in Brussels, advised the Nicaraguan presidency on international relations, and lectured on diplomatic and consular law at the National University of Nicaragua. Their work bridges policy, education, and grassroots initiatives, from directing projects for the Augusto C. Sandino Foundation to serving in Nicaragua's Popular Literacy Army, holding degrees in law and social services. Ambassador Sandino combines academic rigor with real-world insights, offering audiences a unique perspective on multilateralism, South-South cooperation, and the evolving role of diplomacy in a polarized world. Comrade Sandino. Comrade Netfa Freeman. NETFA is an organizer in Pan-African Community Action, PACA. And co-coordinator of the Black Alliance for Peace's Africa team. He is also co-host and producer of the WPFW radio show and podcast, Voices with Vision. NETFA has decades of experience working internationally with people's anti-imperialist movements from Cuba to Venezuela, to Zimbabwe, to Nicaragua, and beyond. These will be our three speakers. Thank you. Yeah, you're first, second, third. Here.
Good evening, everyone. I want to say that it's a privilege to take part in this event, celebrating African Liberation Day today here tonight. I am grateful for this opportunity because it's an opportunity to learn and reflect in many, many important issues. In Cuba, we observe Africa Day not merely as a commemoration, but as a poignant reminder that the pursuit of self-determination is an essential right that must be respected. We share with the African continent a history marked by resilience, resistance, and hope. The horror that was the transatlantic slave trade, which brought millions of Africans to the shores of the United States, Cuba, and other Caribbean countries, also gave us the traditions and legacies of resistance that contributed to the formation of the vibrant African descendant community we are today. For decades, we have developed and sought different ways to connect, not only with the African continent, but with each other, to break the chains of slavery that have sought to reproduce itself time and again in the global South. Historically, imperialist foreign policy has functioned as a tool of domination, aiming to establish a global order through political, economical, and cultural control. This model has been based on imposing power structures that allow hegemonic states to exercise control over strategic territories, ensuring access to natural resources, markets, and labor. From colonialism to modern military interventions, this approach has sought to shape international dynamics according to the interests of the dominant powers. Economically, it has manifested itself through the exploitation of resources and the imposition of development models that favor central economies. Culturally, it has prompted the dissemination of values and ideologies that reinforce the political and social influence of imperialist countries. Over time, various mechanisms have been used to sustain this order, from unequal trade agreements to direct or indirect interventions in the domestic politics of other states. In some cases, it has been justified under the discourse of stability, democracy, or development. Although in practice, it has served to preserve structures of dependency and subordination. In the contemporary era, imperialism has taken on different forms. It exercises domination through multinational corporations, strategic investments, and privileged access to natural resources. The worsening of geopolitical conflicts in the global South, and most notably, the sanctions and diplomatic pressures aimed at influencing government decisions to align with their interests, something that is particularly concerning for our nation. Modern imperialism may not be immediately apparent, but its impact is significant and ongoing, influencing the global landscape. The pretext of defending democracy have been used to justify regime changes in various countries, often with devastating consequences for their populations. For Cuba, this context is deeply personal because since the triumph of the revolution in 1959, we have been a constant target of these strategies. The economic, commercial, and financial blockade that Cuba has faced for more than 60 years is the longest and most comprehensive system of sanctions in contemporary history. The initiatives were first outlined in a memorandum by Lester Mallory, former Assistant Secretary of State for Inter-American Affairs in 1960. For those who are not familiar with the details of this memorandum, I will quote the excerpt that best articulates the true objective of the sanction systems against Cuba. And I quote, "The majority of Cubans support Castro. The only foreseeable way to weaken his internal support is through disenchantment and dissatisfaction arising from economic malaise and material hardship. To that end, all possible means must be rapidly employed to weaken Cuba's economic life. This course of action, being as skillful and discreet as possible, will achieve the greatest advances in depriving Cuba of money and supplies, reducing its financial resources and real wages, causing hunger, desperation, and the overthrow of the government." To this day, I can assure you that the objective has not changed. The strategy has included both the provocation of hunger and hardship among the Cuban people and the emphasis on the Cuban government's inefficiency as the alleged primary cause of these difficulties, rather than attributing it to these external sanctions. Therefore, those who deliberately or through ignorance downplay the blockade or simply consider it a pretext used by the Cuban authorities to justify their shortcomings and errors become complicit in this policy. The blockade against Cuba appears to be an arbitrary measure, but it is not without purpose if it is understood as a deliberate strategy to achieve a specific criminal objective. To undermine the will of the majority of the citizens of my country that is resolute in its decision to exercise its homeland sovereignty. The objective of the blockade is to strangle the Cuban economy and to discredit the Cuban revolutionary project. The impact of this issue is extensive, affecting various aspects of daily life, including health, education, access to food, and technology. The most recent report on the impact of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade imposed on Cuba indicates that only from March 2023 to February 2024, this unilateral policy resulted in material damages estimated at more than $5 billion. The impact of the United States blockade on Cuba's finances over the past 5 years has been significant. From March 2023 to February 2024 only, 48 foreign banks declined to conduct transactions with Cuban banking entities for various reasons. From January 2021 to February 2024, there were 1,064 reports of actions by foreign banks refusing to provide service to Cuban entities. These actions included transfers to purchase of food, medicine, fuel, spare parts for the national energy system, as well as essential consumer goods for the population in Cuba. Cuba's access to external financing is extremely limited and comes with very stringent terms. Cuba's inclusion on the list of states that allegedly sponsor terrorism imposes further limitations and prohibitions on the country, in addition to reinforcing the deterrent and intimidating effects on third countries in their relations with the islands. This measure has caused serious difficulties on our operations in the banking and financial sector and financial trade. But in May 2024, former US Secretary of State Antony Blinken admitted during a hearing before the US Congress that Cuba does not protect terrorists. This assertion effectively dismissed the pretext for the unjust designation as a state sponsor of terrorism. This underscores the fact that the primary motivation behind maintaining Cuba on that list is to defame and rationalize the intensification of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade against my country. The blockade aims at identifying and targeting the main sources of income for the Cuban economy. These actions strictly applied the provisions of the Helms-Burton Act that not only affect our relation with the United States, but also with third countries in the world. While not all Cuba's challenges stem from the blockade exclusively, it is evident that the island issues will be more effectively addressed without the persistence of this policy, whose initial objectives, as evidenced, remains unaltered. The imperialist policy has not only attacked Cuba, but also other countries that share the same values of social justice that underpin the project of the Cuban Revolution. So I know that I have only 1 minute left. So I'm gonna skip to the last part of my presentation and say that, however, imperialism has also sought to dismantle the alliances that historically Cuba has had with countries in Latin America, in Africa, through medical cooperation, educational cooperation, and many other types of cooperations that presents an alternative way of relations between this global South. The intense campaign against Cuba, long-standing medical cooperation in Africa, the Caribbean that we are seeing right now, and Latin America is a prime example of this imperialistic foreign policy, representing yet another attempt to perpetuate neo-colonial dependence in those territories. So the importance of this point cannot be overstated because the approach we advocate offers, as I said, an alternative to conventional resources extraction and the underdevelopment that imperialist foreign policy seeks to perpetuate in the global South. And a last message from Cuba. We will always remain committed to extending our solidarity to all of those who are fighting for a most just future. Finally, I would like to quote Fidel Castro, who along with leaders like Malcolm X, Frantz Fanon, Patrice Lumumba, and many others, served as model for the future that we are trying to build. And I quote, "Let the philosophy of plunder disappear and the philosophy of war will have disappeared. Let the colonies disappear, let the exploitation of countries by monopolies disappear, and then humanity will reach a true stage of progress." This was said 65 years ago and is still an undeniable truth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Comrade Sandino.
Thank you. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. The genocide must be stopped. That's it. There is no other alternative for the world, for humanity. When I was driving from DC here, I was thinking, what should I share with my sisters and brother here in the African Liberation Day? So I was thinking on the theme of the panel, the global anti-imperialist movement. And I was thinking, what can I say to my sisters and brothers that they don't already know? And I was thinking about a response that we found in Latin America. The response was the ALBA, the Alliance of the People, the Bolivarian Alliance of the People, the ALBA, as you may know, la Alianza Bolivariana para las Américas. That was an idea that was brought by the two greatest men we have in the last times in Latin America, Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez. And I was thinking also that the response of Latin America after the so-called end of the Cold War in 1991, it only took us about 10 years or so. So thanks to Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez, they were thinking, what is the difference that we can make in order to get the justice to be established in the first stage in Latin America, and then maybe by our example to go to other areas in the world. And I think that in this idea that they have, the first things that they think about was solidarity. That means that we had to feel the suffering and the desires of our fellow brothers and sisters, or sisters and brothers. And I was thinking, another good guy tell us about that a long time ago. His name was Ernesto Che Guevara, you know. And then they said, besides solidarity, we have to find something else. And that was complementarity. That means that the things that I don't have and you have, you share it with me, you know. Then they were saying justice. We should bring justice. That means that we had to be really equal. Not only the speeches, not only 19, but we had to bring justice. And then they said that we had to cooperate with each other. In that sense, they decided, and they add something else, and they said, let's make our cooperation, our solidarity to make an alliance that is politically, economical, and social in order to defend independence, the self-determinations, and the identity of the peoples. So I was thinking, if we want to have a global anti-imperialist movement, then we have to follow a kind of idea. And that's the idea that the ALBA brought for the Latin American countries. That means that it's a principle of solidarity that genocide in Palestine had to be stopped. It's a principle of solidarity that the brutal and illegal and criminal blockade of the United States against Cuba had to stop. That means that immediately, the so-called sanctions that from my understanding is unilateral coercive measures that are made in order to impose an idea that you change the way that you act because the imperialism doesn't like, you know. So in this struggle that we are facing now, I think that we have some banners to follow, you know. We have to have a free Palestine. We had to end the blockade against Cuba. We have to stop the university coercive measures against Cuba, against Venezuela, against any country that is suffering of that kind of imposition. Why? Because we have the right and we deserve the opportunity to decide by ourselves what we are going to do and what kind of social system we are going to have. In Nicaragua, we have been making changes. We have been developing a new way of democracy. It's changing. See, Nicaragua is the country that had the most women in ministerial position. Now we have 2 co-presidents. By the way, it's a man and a woman. Ooh, what a change of democracy. What kind of the parameters that we used to have. Perhaps because we had to find our own way of doing things and because we had the right to decide how we are going to make our country going. For what? For development, for the well-being of the people. And that's why Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro told us long time ago. So I'm going to stop here because there are too many ideas and too many things that I want to share with you, but the time is not a good thing. It's against myself. Sorry. But think about it. Think about it. If you want to be anti-imperialist, you should support the right of the Palestinian, of the Polisario, of the people of Africa. You have to help and demand the end of the blockade against Cuba, and let Venezuela live alone. And of course, let Nicaragua live alone. Thank you so much.
And now, Comrade Netfa.
Thank you. So it's a really deep honor for me to be share this panel with these two comrades, and I have an affinity for all these countries, including who's not represented here, Venezuela. Have had the fortune to work with the people's movements and even the states. Some people talk about working with the states like something wrong with that, but we should be working with revolutionary states. You know, we need to be doing that, and we need to be defending revolutionary states. One thing, you know, that I thought I would bring to this is the understanding and the perspective of the revolutionary perspective of this. I refer to Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba as the axis of resistance in our Americas. You know, it represents the highest expression of revolutionary Pan-Africanism in this hemisphere. These countries, these movements, the states and revolutions they've built represent the highest expression of Pan-Africanism, revolutionary Pan-Africanism, and socialism and anti-imperialism in this hemisphere. Of course, if you revolutionary Pan-Africanist, I guess it's redundant to say anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, but I tacked on those things. One of the things that make it significant is that the African population, people of African descent in those countries, and the role those populations have played in the decades of resistance against imperialism. And so what we see here are revolutions that are enduring, that the people, the imperialists, have had to design special means of destabilizing and regime change. We call it a multifaceted, protracted war against the people of Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. And that protracted war at its most insidious is in the battle of information. They use misinformation, half-truths, and outright lies against these countries, and we have to be aware of them. And they're in a position right now that they can't just go in and invade. I think that's just not they haven't been in a position to do that and be able to justify it. So that's why the imperialism is using these tactics that we see. You heard Sister Graciela talk about a lot of it in terms of the sanctions. Imperialism is refined as most counter-revolutionary strategies that we see being used, and tactics we see being used all over the world. The most modern ones, I would say, against Cuba. And now they just use them, of course, against Nicaragua and Venezuela, but also around other places in the world. Imperialism, U.S. imperialism in particular, actually, when we talk about the sanctions, they codify their regime change operations, or the regime change policies, into law. The United States government has laws passed by the House and the Senate that are about regime change. Under spreading democracy. For Cuba, it's the Helms-Burton and Torricelli. For Nicaragua, it's the Renacer Act. And ironically, they won't call it the Renacer in Spanish. It means like rebirth or revival, right? And so what they're talking about there, and this is the thing that they is, I mean, I'm projecting, I'm telling what they're interpreting, what they mean. They want to bring back the days of Somoza and also Chamorro. you know, and want to see if they can bring that back. And then I don't know what the sanctions against Venezuela, but these are things that are codified and passed by the elite, political elites in the United States. And they include the misinformation, they include disrupting trade, and we call them extraterritorial in terms of the trade. So a lot of people, when they think of, you know, this is why we fight back when we hear embargo, not fight back, I'm sorry, we redefine. We hear people say the embargo against Cuba is a blockade. It's an act of war. It's not just, and not only is it only about trade, it's about other things, but even the trade aspect is not just trade between the United States and Cuba, it's trade between Cuba and other places in the world. It's extraterritorial. It's what the United Nations has termed cruel and unusual punishment. What they have in their sanctions, and this applies to all the countries, is not just these trying to isolate economically through trade, but also funding activists, what they call them, independent activists, independent human rights activists, and independent media. Given that the people, I'm going off my notes, all right. Given the people, the people in the countries funding, or whatever they do, co-opting the citizens of those countries. Usually the sectors will be the elite class, the bourgeois class of those countries, and or the high, you know, or those who are so marginalized that the socialism, projects of socialism haven't been able to reach them yet. So they're just so I mean, in Nicaragua, they recruited people to do destabilization and create violent chaos, and hoping that the government will come down on it so they can say, look what they're doing. They're clamping down on dissent, you know. And of course, the misinformation will be we don't get the context or the complexity of what happened. That's another story. But they also weaponize identity politics because they know the Africans in these countries, or the African population and the Africans here, that there's a potential for transnational identification. We can identify with them, especially if we understand what it represents and what's there. And then also these countries, it's interesting that these three countries, when it comes to the international stage, I think they represent also this highest integrity of internationalism and solidarity. So like the positions they take around Haiti and Palestine, like the Ambassador Sandino, they're just principled positions. You know what Cuba is doing around the world with doctors and teachers, and just unconditional, just spreading, just teaching people how to be doctors. And the only thing you got to do in return is the promise that you're going to use your skills to help the most impacted of the communities that you came from. Just promise that, and we'll train you to be a doctor free of charge, right? And so sanctions are codified. They interfere in elections, and also in other means by, you know, and so they'll do things that they wouldn't accept in their own country. And then, so for example, try to interfere in the elections. In Cuba, it's not as possible because they have a one-party state. They teach us that for some reason, multi-party state somehow represents an expression of democracy. If you have a one-party state, then you're not a democratic. That's bull. There's nothing about that that's true. And they've enforced this multi-party, quote-unquote, democracy on the rest of the emerging colonized world or neo-colonized world as a way to get their people in there and promote and create artificial polarizations on the political landscape so they can manipulate things. But due to at least Cuba's credit, they've been able to like establish and understand the role of the Cuban Communist Party in the society, and also the electoral process, in which I don't know what the statistic is now, but it's like 80-some, high 80-some% to 90-some% of the people participate in the electoral process. I mean, that's democracy to me. And not only do the people, and this is the same, it's very high in Nicaragua, but also, it's not just representative democracy, where people represent certain geographical areas. They're people that have a voice in the policy that represent different sectors of society: women, youth, workers. That's a revolutionary state. That's what we need. And we need to actually defend these countries and remember that they're the highest expressions of revolutionary Pan-Africanism in this hemisphere. This panel topic is not just about the imperialist machinations against our family and our comrades in these countries. It's also about it demonstrates the revolutionary endurance, or resilience, and the enduring socialism that they've been able to build. And we have to defend that and see that any victory that we can wage, and has lessons for us here, wage for ourselves, self-determination for ourselves within the bounds of the settler colonial United States, is a victory for them and the rest of the world. And any victory the rest of the world, the global South, has against imperialism is a victory for us. You know, we part of the global South within the bounds of the settler colonial as African people and indigenous people here, brothers and family here. We're colonized by settler colonialism. We're not Americans. This ain't our government. This is our colonizer. And so when we fight, and we fight for Cuba, when we fight for Venezuela, when we fight for Nicaragua, we're fighting for ourselves. No compromise, no retreat.
We will now open it up to the floor for questions. And please keep your question under a minute. Thank you. Puff, you coming around? All right. Raise your hands high.
Hi, I just wanted to say thank you, the BAP and AAPRP for putting this on, and also every speaker today has also been amazing. I've like learned a lot and it's been great. My name's Carrington. I'm with the People's Power Assembly and Black Alliance. No, excuse me. I'm so sorry. I'm reading all the stuff in the front. I'm sorry. My name's Carrington. I'm with the People's Power Assembly and Struggle for Socialism Party, and I wanted to just ask, like, what does this unity with Cuba, with Nicaragua, and with Venezuela look like on the ground, like here, you know, in Baltimore, as we do our stuff?
Nefa.
Well, I mean, so we need to politically educate our people about the realities of this, dispel the misinformation and the lies that are waged against these people and again against these countries and these revolutions. And I think to their credit, they make it easy for us. You know, they provide information that dispels lies, you know, in terms of making sure we understand how the government is structured and how people, you know, what the healthcare is like and all that. And so, and this is where it's very practical for us to do it and to see it as also a win for ourselves. When we educate people about what revolutionary universal healthcare is, which all of those countries have, then people here are like, I ain't got that. Wait a minute, you know, it's not universal healthcare is not Medicaid. It's not Medicare, you know, it's not that. And this country can't. So when we do that, and also what is democracy? Democracy ain't just the vote. The democracy is about the people being able to participate in the policies and the projects that govern their lives, being architects and agents of that. So we have to do political education. We got to mobilize and do what you call direct actions when they make imperialist machinations against these countries. When they're talking about leveraging, putting down another, what you call a pin, nail or whatever, something in the sanctions, because they modify these things all the time. They screw in, they tighten them. When they tighten it, we got to be in the street. We got to get on television and news and write, you know, letters and do whatever. Not that we think that these people, these evildoers will change their mind, but we're trying to heighten the contradiction amongst our people. We're trying to raise the consciousness so that we can wage the struggle here. And so those are the two things: direct actions when it comes to what they do against them, and politically educate our people.
Thank you, Nefa. Next question. So, when the button, make sure there's no light on the mic. Yeah, the top part.
Thank you. I was wondering, first of all, the speaking was brilliant. I was so glad to hear.
I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt. Can you please speak up?
Okay. I was wondering about the text that you were reading from. Is that something that I can find myself or online?
Yes. Yes.
What was it called?
The one about Fidel or the entire presentation?
I think.
Both? Okay, so I've made it myself.
Yeah.
But I can share it with you if
Thank
you
you so
like.
much.
Yes, absolutely.
Um,
Yes, of course, of course.
I also wanted to ask because I missed it. You said which countries make up this this axis of resistance?
Countries that are in the axis of resistance.
Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba.
Cool. Thank
Axis
you.
of resistance.
And you said
I think I don't know if I coined that term. I use it. Did I? I use it when I refer to those countries, axis of resistance against imperialism.
yeah. No, I'm glad I'm here because I haven't heard about that one.
No, I mean, why would you call it?
Do you have more?
You were talking about a protracted war, and then you said multifaceted, and then you used a term that said multifaceted, and I didn't get the rest of it.
A multifaceted and protracted war against the countries. It has many tactics and strategies that they use, and it's long.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Yep, right here in front. Right here.
Hi, thank you so much for coming to speak to us today. I was wondering, like especially about Cuba, like what does unity with other Caribbean countries like Haiti look like? And like how does this play into like the war about like information and that kind of battle of ideas?
The unity with other countries and the battle of ideas.
Yeah, like the war of like information.
Okay, so the unity that we have first, Cuba is a Caribbean nation. We consider ourselves a Caribbean nation, a nation from the Caribbean. Our position regarding Haiti has always been very clear. We have always supported the people in Haiti, not sending militaries to Haiti or doing invasions or trying to have something to say in their own sovereignty, but to sending doctors, to sending teachers, to helping them facing natural disasters, and always repeating that the solution for Haiti is not to send troops, is to have an honest compromise in order to achieve peace in Haiti and construct a country that can have self-determination. That's our position towards Haiti. Our position regarding the Caribbean, we are not part of the CARICOM, but we have always have a very close relation with the organization of CARICOM. And we have always had the support of the Caribbean nations, even in the hardest moments, even facing the hardest pressures from the United States government. Right now, we are seeing that with the medical cooperation. I don't know if many of you saw the travels that the new Secretary of State made to several Caribbean countries and the answers of the leaders of those Caribbean countries regarding medical cooperation there. But the answer to the pressures from the United States, from the Caribbean countries, where we rather lose our visas and the possibility to travel to the United States than expel the medicals from our countries. So this is the kind of relation that we have with the Caribbean. And the question about the battle of ideas. So the battle of ideas was something that was put out by Fidel Castro because one of the most strongest campaigns against our country is precisely disinformation. And Netfa was talking about what you can do in order to help Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. And one of the best ways to help us is to stay informed. Because everything that you read about Cuba in the big medias here in the United States is a complete distortion of the Cuban reality. So, thank you. So what we advise every time you can is to go to Cuba, or if you cannot go to Cuba, talk with the Cuban representatives and read the Cuban press. We have the only Cuban press that we have here in the United States, but we have it, is Prensa Latina. Read Prensa Latina. You will find good information about Cuba in Prensa Latina. And we are diplomats, but we are the Cuban people. You can ask us about Cuba's reality. So that would be my answer.
Thank you.
I just a small comment about Haiti. I think the Black Alliance for Peace issued a wonderful communique about the situation in Haiti. I recommend that you read it, and then you will find one of the reasons why Nicaragua didn't sign the so-called CELAC agreement. I mean, declarations. The point was that they were not clear about Haiti. And in a way, a southern way, what they were doing was to extortion the Haiti, and they were saying that they have to give up. That was the whole point. So one of the things why Nicaragua wouldn't sign that final declaration was the situation in Haiti, that we don't agree at all with what they were saying. And then about keep fighting, don't give up, resist, demand the end of the blockade, demand the solidarity with the people of Haiti, and remember, contribute to make Palestine free.
Thank you.
Can I just make one? This is a information, little history. Back in 1994, I think, the head of the U.S. intersection, it was in Havana. Then it was an intersection before it was an embassy. Can't remember the person's name. Sent a memo to the Secretary of State. I think it was Warren Christopher. I can't remember. And it was talking about how they were trying to tailor the qualifications for asylum seekers from around economic and political asylum. They wanted more people to qualify as political asylum so they could say Cuba has human rights. And the memo was stating how much trouble they were having doing it, that they couldn't do it. They couldn't find enough Cubans that were really seeking political asylum. And then in fact, what they found mostly is that those that they were falling under categories were hustling them, and they could tell that they were hustling them. Cuba got a hold of the memo and passed it out to United Nations General Assembly. This is what we call the battle of ideas. One truth smashing 1,000 lies.
Thank you, Comrade Nefa. For this next question, could we just get one of you to answer for this next question?
Just some quick questions. When this imperial regime came in, I was expecting for them to kind of fly off and start attacking, whether it's Venezuela or anything, because they were talking a lot. They were talking pretty tough. It's refreshing to see that they're not actually making those moves of regime change, or maybe we're not aware of that. Are they kind of getting cold feet and retracting from the aggressive regime changes and stuff, or are they just using different methods and working more covertly on that stuff? The second question, I remember part of the Bolivarian, group. There was Ecuador and Bolivia, and they had some very progressive policies. Are they completely gone right now, or can they come back around at some point? The third question is the BRICS. Are you seeing that BRICS is something that global South countries should actively start going towards as a platform and as an alternative platform for large-scale development and trade and stuff like that? Or are there kind of still some question marks about BRICS that need to be answered? Thank you.
Thank you. Can one of you answer that question, please? Or the three questions?
Sorry, I don't hear well. There is no change at all. Imperialism doesn't change. They put a mask. They found a way. Listen, there is a big scandal in Europe now, like 600 billion euros in order that von der Leyen, they are paying in order to undermine popular denounce of what they're doing. The same thing is going on. They are not going to change. The only way that this situation is going to change is that we change them. That's the point. So we have to keep going. See, remember, they used to say that there were two blocks. It was a Cold War, and then there were them. And then 1091, there is no other more Cold War. But now we have to work and fight for a multilateral balance. Take a look to the BRICS, okay? China, Russia, South Africa, India, and then Cuba joined the group, Venezuela is joined the group, Nicaragua will join the group. We all together, we shall overcome the situation.
Thank you. That will conclude this portion. We will move on to the third panel. Thank you all.
Hello, can y'all hear me? All right, y'all can hear me now? All right, how y'all doing tonight? Good. I hope y'all have enjoyed the symposium so far. My name is Tola. I'm a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, and I am going to be the moderator for this last panel, Fighting Inside the Belly of the Beast. The oppression that the US government exerts towards its citizens and people migrating to her shores has become more evident in the last decade. It is undeniable that the US is a settler empire surviving off the backs of the people it genocides and oppresses. People living here attempting to organize face political and economic structures that function as eternal colonies, as was discussed earlier, overt militarization of the police, and the institutional racism that shows up in all aspects of US culture, and much, much more. Our speakers will share with us what it looks like to fight inside the belly of the beast and how important it is to connect our fight internally to the fight against imperialism internationally. In the middle, we have Courtney Sargent. Courtney Sargent is Afro-Seminole Miccosukee and is a professor of sociology at the Community College of Baltimore County, or CCBC, where she teaches courses. Courtney Sargent teaches courses on race, ethnicity, and culture while centering indigenous and diasporic perspectives. For over 8 years, her work has bridged academia and activism, most visibly as chair of CCBC's Indigenous Peoples Day Committee, where she spearheads an annual week of workshops, art exhibits, and ceremonies celebrating global indigenous resilience. Her inclusive vision of indigeneity uplifts African, Afro-diasporic, Asian, Pacific Islander, especially Palestinian, Aboriginal, and Papuan, and Americas-based communities, reflecting her lifelong commitment to decolonial education and solidarity. Raised in a race-conscious household that shielded her from the legacies of Jim Crow, Sargent's scholarship is rooted in her lived experience. As a teenager, she confronted anti-Blackness within 1990s Native tribal politics, galvanizing her focus on Black and Indigenous intersectionality. She holds a degree in African American and Latin American Studies from Bates College, where her fieldwork in Bahia, Brazil, documented Afro-Brazilian religious traditions, specifically candomblé, land rights movements, specifically MST, and Tupi resistance. She further honed her lens in Pan-African studies with a gendered focus at Syracuse University. Whether lecturing on systemic inequities or exploring the Chesapeake with her 2 children, Sargent's work and presence invites audiences to reimagine belonging, resistance, and collective liberation. We also have Lubna, who is an organizer with the Palestine Youth Movement. And yeah. That's right. And then we have Nico Strayhorn, who is an organizer with Black Alliance for Peace, Citywide Alliance, Pan-African Community Action, and is a student at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Each panelist is gonna give their take on fighting inside of the belly of the beast. I'll hand it off to Courtney to go first.
Okay, good evening. Everybody can hear me. I'm a little bit loud. Okay. I would like to give thanks to y'all, of course, for coming here. Y'all hear my Southern accent. But also give thanks to our ancestors who from the continent and throughout the diaspora who have given us so much of a blueprint to work with and that we should honor. In particular, I feel a call to honor our ancestor, Fatima Bernawi, who is the Afro-Palestinian woman who was the first to ever be arrested for Palestinian terrorism. I also feel called on to honor exiled Black Panther Nahanda Abiodun in Cuba, who also nurtured me and guided me, schooled me as I think about the connections that we have in internationalism. First off, thank you so much for pronouncing the tribal group correctly. I come from a history of resistance and sovereignty and people who say we don't want to be ruled by the United States government. So that puts me in, I guess, a unique perspective. The other side of my family is Geechee people from the Gullah Islands who get pushed back, and they blend, of course, with Creek-speaking folks and the tribes called Seminole people. And, you know, Seminole people, they fight 3 wars with the U.S. government. And people often go, "What? Why? Why wouldn't they give in?" It's because they're Black. There's a Black tribe. And so they couldn't, they would be enslaved. So, and there have been recent events with the tribal groups. So I'll talk a little bit about history, and I'll give a little bit of a land acknowledgement as we do for Indigenous folks, which also, of course, includes African people who are the term Indigenous and what we should call Native American or groups here in the Americas is is a political term itself, of course, to name yourself. So generally speaking, it's preferable to call the group by its tribal name. So Dene Nation folks, that's Navajo. Right? And then Indian, of course, I'm going to use it in a certain context when I'm talking about the Indian movement. They chose Indian at that point in time for a certain reason. They said, well, this is what the colonizers called us, and we're going to use it to get free. So that's why they used Indian at that time. Indigenous also has problems, of course, since these folks also claim in our histories, our oral histories, coming from other places. And so the only people who are actually truly indigenous to any place are going to be Black African people. So just when I say indigenous, I mean African folks. There's that. And so I want to first go and open up with the land acknowledgement. Somewhere around here on my notes, I have it. Okay, here we go. So first of all, this is about from Pine Ridge Reservation to Palestine to Kenya, Ghana, and back. We say land back now. I wish to acknowledge the indigenous peoples whose homelands that now in Baltimore City and Baltimore County, the lands upon which these buildings and streets now we see built were once inhabited by the Akahonic, the Asokik, the Asotik, the Choctaw, Konoit, Lenape, Matapik, Matawama, Nanticoke, Ozini, the Patuxet, Piscataway, Powhatan, Susquehannock, and Yakomoka peoples. For thousands of years, they lived, loved, learned, thrived, cherished, celebrated, and died and thrived before the first European incursion here. The indigenous peoples who once lived in this region suffered from colonization, genocide, and cultural erasure, and still do, because colonial settlerism is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing structure. And these removals, the intentional removal of people, the intense resource deprivation is not happening naturally, right? It is something that is as part of the structure to the benefit of other groups, as well as the cultural erasure. Those are ongoing. So yet many of these folks and their descendants, including myself, we still remain oftentimes hidden amongst us. So let us recognize and honor these peoples and their history and legacy, never forgetting who they are and their contributions to this region. Let us refute the doctrine of discovery and continued erasure. Instead, let us pay homage to the indigenous peoples who were here long before Europeans came to destroy. May we be committed to truth telling, refuting falsehoods about the past and the present, and recognize that indigenous people's rightful place as the true natives of this land and the only people who are really American and at the same time not American, that is also an imposed imperial colonized identity that has many different problems. One of the problems that I often see is that people can't, because of Latino or Hispanic ethnicities, people, when you close their eyes and they imagine what an illegal person looks like, they're staring in their mind at a full-blooded native. That's what that is. But because of colonial terms and nationalities like Mexican or El Salvadoran, these people can be white, of course, they can be Black, they can be mixed with different things. At the same time, the majority of people are going to be of indigenous Native American ancestry or descent. Every single time one of these people is deported and forcibly removed, this is the Indian Removal Act. This is Andrew Jackson over and over again. But it can be very difficult for people to see. Sometimes people ask me, why do you think, Courtney, so many Americans are unmoved by the genocide in Palestine? And I think, well, because we are, products of colonial settlerism. And at the same time, people know better. They know better. So as part of these processes, so I always point out to my students, you rarely hear, I've never heard Americans say, I want to go visit a reservation. Because they know. Why would you want to go see something like that? Right? I still hear people talk about indigenous peoples in the past tense. Right? And I have my students say oftentimes, especially with Black and with brown folks, I say, let us all say together, I care about the future of indigenous children. I care about the future of Black children. It's a sentence so many people never utter. Right? And that's part of the colonial mind. And part of decolonization is waking up and seeing how even myself, right, we catch ourselves doing things and thinking about things in a way where we have, that reflects cultural hegemony in the sense that the norms and values of the dominant culture, which represents, of course, the wealthiest and elite, most privileged, capitalist, bourgeois entity in our society, is controlling our thinking, our interests, our curiosity can be controlled by them. And so I ask that if you take anything away from this, please begin to question what you even find yourself interested in. So I will say that. I will talk a little about the indigenous, the American Indian movement. A lot of people don't know how militant the group was, and it is. They saw themselves as a history, a continued history of, you had Sitting Bull and you had Geronimo and you had Wildcat and Osceola, you had the people who came before, but they saw themselves as part of that lineage of continued resistance. And we must see ourselves the same way. And seeing ourselves, a lot of people want to be revolutionaries. They want to plow the field. They want to go in and be the strikers, I would say. But you got to remember, we need fertilizers. We need people who stay the stay, who hold things down and do that back work to sustain movements. And so I consider myself as just one of those background folks. So I will definitely say that they also, I'll call them AIM, the AIM American Indian movement, was highly militant, and they worked with the Black Panther movement. All right, that's where they get their 20 points from. When they take over the Bureau of Indian Affairs and federal offices across, they had a 20-point program that they developed from the 10-point program from the Black Panthers. When they developed in Minneapolis, right, they started on weekends, recording and taking note about police brutality. They were working with a project that was called the Soul Project, which was a Black anti-police brutality collective. So there's so much also when it comes to share history with erasure, when it comes to maintenance also of the state, the ghettoization of indigenous peoples on reservations and abject conditions. Exact same thing with intense resource deprivation of Black folks here in urban areas and rural areas across the United States. This is not a coincidence. This is highly profitable to those who dominate at the highest levels of the social hierarchy in colonial settlerism. The same thing goes with Zionism, and the way it operates is a form of white supremacy to justify colonization over Black and brown folks. And so we need to be able to, at the most basic level, you can fool some of the people some of the time. You never fool all the people all the time. You damn sure ain't gonna fool no Pan-Africanist. But if you know how to put those together, and that's what I generally do, help students to see that these are repeated processes over and over again. The United States government and whatever entity it has, it launches over 1,500 military interventions and wars. The U.S. has gone to war the most with Native American peoples. And so sometimes when I talk to even people in the Palestine movement, I said, don't worry. By the way, we're still here, right? And at the most fundamental level, we outnumber, we'll never forget, whatever it is, it's working class people, as people of color, we outnumber those folks. And they will bring whatever but we remember who we are. We remember who we come from. And we remember where we're going, and we're going towards liberation. So I'll drop it at that. I know my time is up.
Thank you so much. Passing it on to Lubna.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lubna. I'm an organizer with the Palestinian Youth Movement. Thank you for all being here today, and thank you for the invite from the organizers. I'm going to be primarily talking about organizing within the Palestine Liberation Movement from here in the belly of the beast. So today is day 594 of the US-backed Zionist onslaught in Gaza. It's been over 3 months since the Zionist entity has broken the ceasefire, and over 2 months since any aid trucks have been allowed in. Palestinians who survived the nonstop bombing by the Zionist entity then faced starvation as a result of the Zionist-made famine. And all of this is not only being greenlit by the United States, but also funded with our tax dollars with these seemingly never-ending blank checks that the US keeps writing to the Zionist entity. Here in the United States, the Trump administration, in line with a long history of cracking down on anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, anti-racist movements, is attempting to sow fear and chaos into the Palestine liberation movement by threatening deportation and imprisoning people like Mahmoud Khalil and Rumaysa Ozturk. Every other week, free Mahmoud Khalil. Every other week, the Trump administration is also trying to pass laws that codify these repressive acts, like laws against boycotting Zionist-made goods, or even enabling the Department of Treasury from stripping the tax-exempt status of organizations that it suspects, with no actual evidence required, of supporting what the US is deeming as terrorist organizations. And despite all of this support from the United States and the conditions in Gaza, the Zionist entity and Zionist society in general is still fracturing. Their only point of unity is violence against Palestinians, with their only disagreements being against the scale and the speed of the genocide. The Zionist entity itself is unsustainable and could never stand on its own. And it's not just a matter of being supported politically by the US with some weapons and a few dollars. We're talking about on the order of hundreds of billions of dollars from the West on a yearly basis. So we have to ask, why is the US propping up this settler colonial state that's costing it hundreds of billions of dollars? And the only real answer to that is because the Zionist entity acts as an imperialist outpost in the region and fulfills the US interests in the region. It's the card that the US keeps playing when they're dealing with other key players in that region. And we can look at the Abraham Accords and see how the US uses its powers and resources to push normalization between other countries in the region and the Zionist entity in exchange for some amount of monetary loans to these countries or some sort of political alignment. Like, for example, with Morocco, they recognize their sovereignty over the Western Sahara in exchange for normalization with the Zionist entity. We've even heard Biden himself state that if there was no Israel, the US would have to create one. Excuse me. We know the fate of the Zionist entity and the US imperialism go hand in hand. And when people reject Zionism in Palestine and around the world, they have to reject fascism here in the United States. And that creates a threat to imperialism. The genocide in Gaza and this unfettered support for the Zionist entity is also exposing fractures and contradictions within the Trump administration itself. For example, we have the America First crowd that wants the US to pull out of this support. And it's not because of a sense of morality or respect for Palestinians. It purely stems from their belief that the money should be spent differently than what it's being spent for right now. So when we see these fractures within the core of imperialism, it helps inform our tasks here in our role in the struggle. Because whether people see it or not, here in diaspora, we have a role in the struggle, and it's not just purely standing in solidarity with our people back home. We have to actively participate in the struggle, especially here in the belly of the beast. There's a quote by Che Guevara he says, "I envy you, you North Americans are very lucky. You are fighting the most important fight of all. You live in the belly of the beast." And that's true still today. Because the Palestinian cause has always threatened the US imperialism. Before Oslo, Palestinians were heavily organized wherever they were. There were all these institutions that existed and connected people beyond borders, connected us to our home, and provided people the opportunity to actively be political. And then Oslo came in and erased all of that. So it created this generational gap between this generation that was highly organized, and then this generation that now their only real method was just, independently claiming solidarity for Palestine. And then our generation now is we're trying to rebuild all of these institutions that were erased. And so this continues to be a threat to US imperialism today, because while Palestinian liberation may be the vanguard, it's a movement that unifies and brings together all types of anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, and anti-racist movements. And that unity in struggle is what the US fears and is working to repress. And it's the same reason that Fred Hampton was assassinated for his work on the Rainbow Coalition. It's that unity across all these different struggles being brought together, threatening US imperialism here in the core. So why does this unity and struggle threaten imperialism? I think whether it's clear or not that our struggles are interconnected, the enemy ultimately sees the struggles as connected. And Zionist and imperialist powers, our enemies, are strategically connected themselves. Malcolm recognized that with US imperialism and Zionism, we're not dealing with two separate enemies, but one global structure of violence that seeks to annihilate and subjugate Black and brown people. There's even a book called The Palestine Laboratory, and it talks about how the Zionist entity uses Palestine as a testing ground for weaponry and surveillance technology that then they export to the rest of the world. Everything they do in Palestine, the weapons, the surveillance, the police tactics, the indefinite incarceration are just tactics they test out and prove in Palestine and then bring here to the United States to use against Black and brown people. So then what's our role in the belly of the beast? Our role is to take up the struggle in an active way. Our enemy may have power, but they have vulnerabilities, and we have to target these vulnerabilities and contradictions that continue to develop within these oppressive powers. We have to sever the connections between US imperialism and Zionism and ultimately bury both. Palestine can't be free while US imperialism continues to exist. So the way that we do that practically is to build a diverse mass movement, not just through mobilizations, but through organizations that can deploy a diverse set of tactics to achieve an arms embargo. And that's what we're doing with the Mask Off Maersk campaign. So for those who aren't aware, Maersk is a logistics company that has been supplying genocide to the Zionist entity to commit in Palestine. And we're working to now just expose them and have them cut ties with their shipment of military cargo from here in the United States to the Zionist entity. In addition to an arms embargo, we also have a role to contribute to the steadfastness of our people so that they can continue to stay on the land and continue the struggle. And so that comes from our Ta'ziz al-Sumud fundraiser, where we're working to raise over $2 million to send to an organization called Mecca that has been providing that aid back in Palestine. So real material impact to make sure that our people can continue to stay on the land and continue in the struggle itself. And we don't have to build all of this from scratch. So despite Oslo wiping out all these organizations and institutions, we're standing on a path that was paved by generations before us and will continue to be built by generations after us. And it's with our unity and struggle and our building our power that we'll overcome these oppressive powers. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Nico. I'm with Pan-African Community Action, and I'm also with BAT Baltimore. And so Pan-African Community Action is a grassroots group of Africans based in Southeast DC, and we organize for community-led power. We are anti-capitalists, and we stand against all systems of race, class, gender, and sexual orientation-based oppression. And so we understand that the United States also is a settler colonial entity and that Africans are domestically colonized within this entity. We see that African communities are systematically underdeveloped, and while both labor and brain power are extracted for the benefit of white systems of domination. Something that's very important to recognize when we're organizing here is that militarization is very pernicious. It affects us all, and actually the militarization of society does not only make us less safe, but it also makes us extremely dependent on its machinations. So for example, the Secure DC crime bill was passed in 2024 after so-called, well, I guess record crime waves, murder rates or whatever, that was being highly reported in the DC media. And what this did was criminalize Black youth and made so-called drug-free zones, which were just redundant policies to be able to stack charges against people caught with possession of drugs, etc., And honestly, it was just a way to crack down on Black people, African youth. And you weren't allowed to wear masks anymore. It was a mask ban in there. If you were caught congregating in groups of 2 or more in a so-called drug-free zone, you could be harassed by the police, the Metropolitan Police Department. And something that was very striking as well is the amount of money that they put into policing the fares, right? Something that we think about is public transportation and how that's necessary, especially in the city, to get around, to be able to get your groceries, because a lot of African communities don't have grocery stores in them, at least in a readily available area. There are tons of food deserts, and you know, yeah, you can't carry like your week's worth of groceries by hand, you know, 10 blocks, right? So they are policing the fares, which is only $2, but they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on salaries to police $2 fares. They're putting up these like very high, I don't know if you've seen them, these extremely high barricades, so people can't jump the fare anymore to get where they need to go. And the people that are policing these fare things are actually other Africans, right? They're getting outside and they're getting off of the stops that are going back into the communities that are separated from the rest of like the wealth of the city. Something that I find interesting even is if you look at wards 7 and 8, they're separated, which actually has the most Africans in DC as they've been pushed out to the surrounding areas because gentrification has been hollowing out the heart of what used to be Chocolate City. Now they're sort of pushing them into the behind the river, the Anacostia River, and it's kind of like a Gaza situation, really. They're containing them, you know, into this very small place until they can move out into what we could call like our own Sinai or the PG County, right? I think that it's very important to recognize these patterns of domestic colonization and how it disempowers us. It's also just important to recognize how the education system is also a mechanization and also a tool of militarization. For example, a lot of the weapons programs, you know, target our children at a very young age. You have these tech schools that are a part of, or that are across the city, and so in DC particularly, they find the children. They have you test to get into public schools, you know, so you can see who is worthy to get the access to these resources instead of bringing these resources to the children. So we can see actually who can make the best use, even if they don't test the best, right? Because they want people to ultimately produce things that benefit, again, systems of white domination, not necessarily going to be an electrical engineer so you can figure out better and more effective ways to bring power to your community, but instead ways to go and bomb people, right? Like, it's very depressing hearing people spend their whole time feeling like they're gifted, right? Getting into the gifted programs, going to school, getting these scholarships, and then all of a sudden they find out the only job they can get is at Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. So what we do is we educate the community because we need ideological clarity in order to truly organize ourselves and leverage that power. The strongest power is knowledge, but in order to do that, we need to get together and hear each other's ideas. We need to bounce all that off each other. And something that we do is we do our Sada Shakur study groups every 2 weeks. And we talk about these issues, right? And we bring people from the community together to do that. We also realize that we can't just constantly be talking. We have to actually get out and start building these institutions of power. We have to start doing these community health programs, these community food programs, finding the gaps where we can fill in beyond just you know, the welfare and nonprofit programs or whatever we can try to extract from the system. We have to show people that we could do this ourselves, right? That what was said earlier, USAID, for example, that exact system exists in the nonprofit industry here, right? They're not really building things. As soon as those programs go away, we're left with nothing. You know, so we have to be able to show our people that we could do this ourselves, and we have to just put in our own work. And it's really hard because not a lot of us have a lot of time, and a lot of our jobs actually go against the things that we're trying to build, right? So we spend 5 days a week undoing the work that we do in our free time. So we have to work twice as hard in order to truly achieve revolution here, because Africans, it's not looking, it's great. We have a great moment here, but it's also, I have to admit, it's not looking also that great for a lot of our organizing efforts, because I mean, we could be doing better, I would say, you know. Unfortunately, people are still caught up in liberalism, and we have to understand that we need to be against capitalism. You know, we need to stand for people. We need to understand that it's international struggle. So I'll yield there, and yeah.
Very good. Thank you so much, Nico. And thank you to all three of our panelists. Y'all really gave us some stuff to reflect on. So we're going to shift into the Q&A. So please raise your hands, and Jamila will come around with a mic for you to provide your questions. And I will ask the panelists to keep your responses to 2 minutes since we're running close on time. I'm not seeing any hands. Oh, there we go.
How you guys doing? Thank you. You are an amazing panel. I appreciate you guys being here. I appreciate being here. I would just wanted to ask, as a father of two Africans in the Americas, and trying to prepare them for life here and the struggle here, more importantly, I wonder, how can we be more involved in cultural exchange programs between different colonized peoples? And that's to everyone.
You know, and that's a good question, right? And I think that so much of the way that colonial settlerism works is to occupy, divide, and segregate so that we don't. I remember, for example, I integrated Alabama's gifted program schools, and I'm here in the flesh. I tell my students all the time, when we talk about race and racism, please give me modern examples. You don't have to go back to slavery, because I'm right here in the flesh. My mother integrated Alabama public schools in our county. So there's two generations. We're definitely traumatized by that, I would definitely say. But at the same time, that the way we're set up is that we don't get to know each other and each other's struggles. And then we have these instances, for example, you know, with the African in the line, the West African in the line, you know, said something rude to me. So now they don't like us. And you know, there is a history where we do need to have those conversations. So I think my 141 course is like really important, because I'm like, we're going to talk about Pakistan and India. We're going to talk about struggles of Afro-Palestinians. We're going to talk about these things that students have never talked about, but maybe worried about. At the same time, I think that as young, I was very curious, and I guess very against the system. So I went to Cuba when I was 17. And so going on the caravan to Cuba, and I've been there 3 times since then, really opened my mind. So I think that traveling is another way into seeing other Black folks in diaspora, Afro-Mexican folks. And then I went to Brazil and did a year there, and I went back and did another, you know, and so I saw, and I was able to, of course, you know, exchange. But if I was where I was from, in middle of nowhere, Alabama, it ain't happening, you know. So another thing is, if you know, if we could have organizations where we, you know, something like this, where you could have a youth program and a youth exchange day for colonized folks, that would be something that you can come and join in and help, you know, organize around, because I would bring my kids as well, you know, because I think it is absolutely very important.
Thank you so much. And I think we had another question over here. Yep.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. The question that I have is how to engage our community members in the masajid, especially after the so-called war on terror. I think it was the CVE programs, I think it was, how like a lot of our masajid, especially the boards of the masjids, have been recruited into these kind of counter-terrorism programs. A lot of our masajid are partnered with these police departments. So I'm wondering how, what strategies could be employed to engage with our community members in the masjid, and like struggle against these liberal programs that are being cemented in our spiritual spaces.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's a really difficult space. We struggle with it as well. I think honestly, it comes down to, I'm going to say two things. I don't overdo it. But number one, I think it's just a lot of knowledge building and education. The reason I think that a lot of the masajid are, again, more fearful to really push for things like, the Palestine Liberation Movement or other like radical movements is out of fear. And so I think education of where that fear stems from and where it can go, and finding against like these repressive tactics is where we have to step in. And so it's not so much as us, doing these specific events or like education events to draw the masajid committees in. It's about us going into those committees themselves or communities themselves, and building with the organizations that already exist. We're never going to be able to build something that draws the people that are already very loosely organized around something to come to this other thing that they're already fearful of coming. And so we have to step into those spaces and intervene in that way. And so that is in the form of either going to, whatever community events it might be, or simply, town halls and intervening there. But it really is just about fully integrating with those communities and starting to form those really one-on-one personal bonds and relationships. And the churches, of course.
For sure. All right, we got time for one more question. I'm seeing two hands though. Oh dang. Three. Okay. I'm sorry, y'all. We're really running on time. I don't know what. Oh, Nico, you was gonna say something? My bad. Go ahead. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that we shouldn't underestimate how aware people are of their own conditions and the oppression that they face, and that even though there's a pervasive environment of liberal ideas that I guess push people towards reform, they understand that the revolutionary line, and that's the most effective and pragmatic line, honestly. I was just at the reparations rally over the weekend, and ironically, nobody believed actually that they would be able to get reparations. You know what I'm saying? At least not without, some real struggle, right? So I think that really just saying the obvious things, asking the obvious questions, and always asking the obvious questions, really not caring about like the form necessarily per se, just saying, hey, well, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like how is China doing colonialism in Africa with these bilateral trade agreements or whatever, and then they're like, oh, I don't know what that, I mean, that gets into the weeds, but just like really obvious questions. Do you think the white man really about to give you reparations? And then you can get somewhere, and really start talking about revolutionary ideas. What can we do instead to actually make that a reality? And people like, I mean, the most asked question is just, what can we do next, So I think really we just have to figure out the answers and build institutions to give people a way to do something next.
Thank you for that. All right, so I know we had three hands up, so I think the best approach is that the three hands ask the question, and then we have one panelist answer, and then we can. Okay, I'm being told no, so no more questions. I think we got like 3 minutes left, 2 minutes. I'm being told no by other people. So, okay, so one more question. You got the mic, you can go.
All right, thank you. My name is Steph, and ironically, I have a question, what do we do next? So could y'all expand on how Black and brown people who are like so-called gifted, formerly gifted children can harness and reappropriate our education for our communities? Like in this, oh, okay. For real though, like in the spirit of Black Panther parties, like free healthcare and the community schools, and I know we can do it, but I just want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where the AIM actually, their movement began. You know, they noticed that the schools were the places that were harmful to indigenous children, not even like, so this is off reservation. So, you know, Indian boarding schools go all the way to 1960s. And by the way, a parallel event happened to Black African folks here in the US, where the children, after following the Black codes, if they didn't have a past, if they were loitering or vagrancy, you know, they were put into these homes and often murdered and buried in mass burial grounds. All throughout and over the South. But those were places where also what is happening with Native Americans is happening with Black folks, where we're losing our children at astronomical numbers from social workers and intervening and taking these children. So schools were a place where that happened, because the teacher would say, oh, you know, this child doesn't come to school with new sneakers or clothing or something, you know, and social workers be sent in, and the children were systematically taken away. So that's actually where in 1970 a big bill happened. It was called the Indian Education Act, that gave natives off reservations money, and they took it and said, well, what we're going to do with the money is we're just going to build our own schools. And that was a big issue. It was a big problem that kind of led to AIM being militant and radicalized. But absolutely, for education, so the system and your children's minds, and we need to have our children, the Bible says, and I use this sometimes even though I'm not a religious or a Christian person, the Bible says, you know, raise your children in the way that they should go. Raise your children to know who they are, and bring them to events like this. Teach them what's wrong with the way the school is saying things. At the very least, you're gonna have that if you have children now. So I would say, is that as part of my answer? That's so, and then of course making sure that you are working with schools, with the teacher, what they're being educated on, having a co-curriculum, and of course as they move over, making sure that they get the opportunities that they get. I'm telling you, middle class white parents get their kids into gifted programs and they're not gifted, okay, all the time. Hound these people, hound the professors. You have these students, their parents email me saying, can my child redo the paper? And students of color are afraid to ask for help. So you got to know that if you paid for it and it came out of your money, and you already know that it's already going to do you harm, you need to take whatever change you have left over, you need to flip that and make sure that you get that education back and get out most of it out you can out of the system. All right. One more round of applause to all three of our panelists. Thank you so much. I am going to hand it off to the closing speeches. I'll leave the mic up here.
There we go. Good evening, everybody. Just wanted to stop by and introduce myself. I know I don't look like it, but I am the pastor of this church. I am the Reverend Melick Thomas. I've been serving here as the pastor of this church since July of 2023. This is Payne Memorial AME Church. I am also blessed to have grown up at this church when my father pastored here about 25 years ago. And I just wanted to welcome you and just share a little bit about the history of not just this church, but the history of the organization to which this church belongs, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. For those of you who may or may not be aware, the African Methodist Episcopal Church is the first Christian organization founded in this country that was formalized as a denomination and as a civil rights organization. It was founded in resistance to white colonial oppression in 1787 when a 27-year-old Richard Allen and Absalom Jones and Flora Allen and so many others resisted the physical removal of African bodies at the altar of the St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, ironically 6 blocks away, where at the same time they were debating the Constitution of these yet to be United States. It was out of that moment that Richard Allen formed the Free African Society, which in 1816 becomes the African Methodist Episcopal Church, founded, believe it or not, as a Pan-African organization. The first places, Richard Allen looks at the Haitian Revolution, looks at the way that Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines and so many others organized liberation on the island in the country of Haiti, that he took that inspiration and decided to have its first general conference, its organizing conference in an enslaving state in Baltimore in 1816. And so in 1816, the African Methodist Episcopal Church was formed in Baltimore, and the only limitation to you whether or not you could be a member is if you own slaves, you could not be a member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And for the last 200 plus years, our denomination has practiced. We have churches from here all the way to Malawi. We are in countries all around this world, and our desire and our goal is to see the liberation of the whole person, spirit, soul, and body, starting with those whose skin has been kissed by nature's sun. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm really excited to be able to, because before I was a pastor, I was a community organizer in Chicago and even in the city. And so I'm just really grateful to be able to connect with organizations that, in the words of the Migos, walk it like they talk it. And I'm just grateful to see what else can come out of this holy matrimony between faith and freedom movement and ministry. And so hopefully you will continue to feel welcome here at Payne Memorial AME Church, and anytime that you're in West Baltimore, feel free to holler at us. God bless you.
How y'all doing? All right. My name is Rafiki Morris, and I'm an organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We gonna start over? Okay. How y'all doing? They gave me a hard job because time is up, and I like to talk. I'm an organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party. I'm also a member of the African Party for Independence of Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde. And I'm a member of the Coordinating Council of Black Alliance for Peace. And first of all, I want to just thank everybody for your participation in African Liberation Day. I want you to understand that African Liberation Day is an institution, and that this is happening all over the world. Everywhere that African people are, they are organized and they are commemorating African Liberation Day. Part of my job here today was supposed to be kind of to summarize what you have heard. And I only know one way to do that real quickly. So I want y'all to pay attention. Smash imperialism. Smash capitalism. Smash patriarchy. Smash colonialism. Smash neocolonialism. Smash racism. And smash Zionism. 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 We have heard a few examples of the struggles that are taking place in Africa. These examples are the highlights of the struggle, where progress is being made, where victories are being won. But we want you to understand that the struggle is not just taking place in these places. Everywhere in Africa, our people are fighting to be free of imperialism and colonialism and neocolonialism. We have had examples of the struggles that are being waged by our people throughout these Americas. We've given you the premier examples of people waging struggle against imperialism, but we want you to understand that everywhere in the Western Hemisphere where there is oppression and exploitation of the native people, of the African people, of the poor people, there is a struggle taking place against imperialism. We heard about the fight in the belly of the beast. This is your fight. And we tell people all the time, the best thing you can do to stand in solidarity with Cuba and Venezuela and Nicaragua is to destroy imperialism in the United States of America. The Cubans don't need you to wage the Cuban Revolution. In Nicaragua, they know how to wage the Nicaraguan Revolution. In Venezuela, they understand how to wage the Venezuelan Bolivarian Revolution. The question is, do you know, do you understand what your role is in this revolution that our people around the world are fighting? These are different fronts of the same struggle. And the world is counting on us here in the belly of the beast to do our job. We have to get organized. We have to get organized. We have to get organized. We've been saying that the biggest problem that we have in our movement is the failure to understand the exact nature of the forces that are in contradiction. A failure to understand the nature of imperialism, the nature of neocolonialism, the nature of patriarchy. We look at something, we see its outlines, we see its surface, we think we understand it, and we go in to fight. But there's something more than an outline. There's something more than a surface. There's something more than a perception. There's an essence in there. There's an essence inside of that we must understand if we're going to defeat them. I give you an example. Everybody here all day long been talking about getting rid of neocolonialism. And everybody calls those puppets in Africa the neocolonialists. They call the puppets in City Hall the neocolonialists. They call the puppets in the Congress the neo-colonialists. They are not the neo-colonialists. The neo-colonialists are the capitalist and imperialist multinational corporations and military complexes that oppress and exploit the masses of the people. The puppets is just that, puppets. And if we want to defeat neo-colonialism, we're not going to do it by attacking the puppets. We have to attack the system. We have to destroy the system that hires the puppets. We have to destroy the capitalists who pay the puppets. We have to fight the Zionists who undergird the puppets. We have to know the exact nature of our enemy. The enemy does not just attack us from outside. The enemy is not just somebody knocking at the door, trying to come in your house and take what you got. Because you, we, us also have enemies inside of our house that we must fight. And even worse, we have enemies inside of our own bodies that we must fight. We have the capitalist ideas inside of us. And we bring these ideas into these organizations and think we're going to use them to fight against our enemies. No, you are doing the job of your enemy. You are doing the work of your enemy. Now, you can do it consciously and get paid for it. But most of us do it unconsciously. We ain't even getting paid. So we have to understand the exact nature of the struggle we are engaged in. Our theme this year is Pan-African, Africa for the Africans. Pan-African unity across borders in the battle for socialism and against imperialism. I am not going to talk about all that. I want to talk about unity. Because some of us think that us 5 people over here engaged in an action against Zionism is enough. And some of us think that in order to fight imperialism, I have to come up inside of these organizations and gain power in those organizations. And that's how to prepare ourselves to fight against the enemy. And some of us think that the things that I do as an individual, since I'm reading and I'm studying and I'm talking to people, that is enough. You think that your separated activity, your isolated actions are enough to defeat our enemy. You don't understand our enemy. The only way to defeat our enemy is for your action and your action and your action and my action to all come together into one action, conscious action against a singular enemy until they are defeated. We must unite. Not because we like each other. Not because we always agree with each other. We have to unite in order to defeat our enemies. We have to unite in order to defeat our enemies. We have to unite in order to liberate our people. We have to unite in order to smash Zionism. I'm going to end on this one. Because especially in the African community, we've been hearing all kind of stuff. Palestinians don't like black people. Let's say it's true. Palestinians are fighting the people that's kicking your ass. Oh, excuse me, I'm in church. Palestinians are fighting your enemies. Palestinians are fighting the imperialism that stole you from Africa and brought you here and made you think you was American. Palestinians are fighting for your freedom. Why are you not fighting with them? We say the Palestinian revolution is our revolution. We don't see any distinction between the struggle of the Palestinians and the struggle of the Africans. And we know the struggle of the Palestinians better than anybody else because they've always been the only neighbor of Africa. That's where Palestine is, you know. It's the only place in Africa where you can walk off the continent. You got to go through Palestine. It's like that today, and it was like that 100,000 years ago. When all people left the continent, every single one of them went through Palestine. And ever since then, the forces of evil, the forces of oppression, the forces of exploitation have sought to conquer Palestine. Palestine has been conquered by everybody. The Babylonians, the Mesopotamians, the Romans, you name it. They came into Palestine because that's the crossroads between Africa and the world. This didn't just start with them Zionist pigs that are there today. This has been going on for a long time. And it's time to bring it to an end. Palestine is the litmus test. All y'all say, you anti-imperialist? Well, if you anti-imperialist, you better be anti-Zionist. I told you I didn't have much time, and I'm sure I've gone over. But I want to be free. I want to be liberated. And in order to do that, we've got to reach an understanding among ourselves. You cannot learn what you need to know to engage in this struggle by yourself. You can read all the books you want, but you can't learn the tactics of this revolution by yourself. You can't learn how to politically educate the people by yourself. Whatever it is, you're doing it by yourself, you're doing it wrong. We got to be in an organization that is working for the liberation of the people. We must be organized. Political education is a collective process. So you got to study with somebody else. And studying with somebody else is not enough, because you got to take those things that you learn in your study with somebody else and put them to practice in them streets out there. This is the nature of the struggle. It's a theory, it's a practice. One without the other is worthless. So we take this question of Zionism. We're talking about the historical moment. I know I'm out of time. We're talking about this historical moment where the illegal racist state of Israel is in its weakest state that has ever been since the time it was established. Nobody in the world supports them except the pigs who ordered them to do what they're doing. This is not an Israeli war. This is a U.S. war. The U.S. is not sponsoring it. They're orchestrating it. They're not serving the interests of poor Jews from Eastern Europe. They're serving the interests of U.S. imperialism, because that's the fort of the U.S. imperialists in that part of the world. Y'all remember them cowboy movies? Every time they went to go kill some Indians, they would put a fort out there in the middle of the Native American land. That's what Israel is. That's what it is. and it must be destroyed. And this is the historical moment to destroy it. Because when you destroy Israel, you remove the US's proxy in the region, and you weaken imperialism in a way that it has never been weakened before. So I will end with this. Last year, we spent a lot of time in the encampments and in the rallies and in the demonstrations with the Palestinians. Almost every day we were there. And when we wasn't there, they called us and said, "Where you at?" And during that period, I learned this thing. They say that if you encounter something 7 times, it slips past your conscious mind into your subconscious mind. That means it gets beyond your rational thought and it seeps into your soul and your spirit. And there's all this confusion about the solutions for the struggle in Palestine. So I'm going to tell you the solution 7 times. And every time somebody asks you about a ceasefire, you're going to know what to say. When they tell you we need to lobby Congress, you're going to know what to say. When they say we need to just be nonviolent, you're going to know what to say. All right? So here we go. Smash Zionism. 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 As always, our party wants to thank you for joining us at African Liberation Day. Baltimore has the longest continuously running African Liberation Day event in the United States. It has moved from day to day, from this day to that day, from this form to that form, from this park to that park. But it always takes place in Baltimore. There's an African Liberation Day. So we want to thank you for joining us for African Liberation Day. We want to thank you for sitting here and listening and paying attention to the presentations that have been made. We want to ask you to join an organization that's working for your people. And we want to say to you as we close out all of our presentations by simply stating, we stand with you, ready for the revolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. We are done with African Liberation Day. If y'all want to talk, I please ask you to please make your way out of the church because we are over time and we would like to respect this space that lets us do these events here for free. So please clean up your trash. There'll be a trash bag on the ground outside in the sunroom. If you want to take any pictures, please hurry up because I'm about to cut down everything. No retreat. Oh, one more thing. One more thing. Men in the organizations I'm a part of, come here, please. And that little mic right there, can you bring it upstairs to Rashid?